Yeah, welcome everybody. How's everybody doing today? That we just decided to do a drum roll at the last second. That's what you guys got. Hope you enjoyed that. What up? Welcome to the Cards and Kicks podcast. I am Jacques. I don't know why I'm yelling. I guess I'm just really excited to do the podcast today. So I just got hyped all of a sudden after the drum roll. Felt like I was coming out on stage and I had to like turn it on. Welcome, Minnesota!
It's turned into wrestling, like an intro to a wrestling match.
Yeah.
I love it.
Apparently so. But welcome to the podcast. We got a great show for you guys today. Got a lot of good stuff happening in the sneaker and car world. Some follow-ups to last week's show. Some new stuff popped up. Some sports-related stuff. So there's a lot of things in there. But obviously, before we get too far into this, we've got to give you the intro. So let's do it.
You want another drum roll?
Here we go. No, I don't need that energy. Let's see what this is going to go. It's going to go cars, kicks, spell cars, C-A-R-S, cars, kicks, spell your kicks, K-I-C-K-S, yay! Can you guys tell my nephews were here?
I was not aware that we were now doing a children's program.
I was just going to say, I'm the one playing uncle duty this week, babysitting the nephews. And I hear that on every iPad in the house right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I knew exactly where that was going.
We're just going after a new audience. We want to hook them young so that then they listen to us for the next, decade plus.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing with that. I see what you're doing with that.
Yeah.
If you're new here, tell any of your friends from 4 years old up to about 70 years old, this is the podcast for them, because that's how wide we're shooting now.
Indeed.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. I am Jacques Slade at Cousteau. You can find me all over the internet. And as you can tell, I'm like the idiot here on the show. I talk about sneakers, a little bit about cards, but I'm learning a lot more. But that's only because of these two individuals who really hold this show down. Without them, it would just be me singing random intro songs, and you don't want that at all. So, Nick, go ahead, introduce yourself and let them know.
My name is Nick Ingvall. I am the kind of best of both of these worlds, so to speak, because I'm always in the car stuff and always into the sneaker stuff. And really, I just try to keep the connection between these two, keep them in the rails as much as possible. But I'll let Erik introduce himself on the car side of things.
Yeah, Nick really is the best of all that, because Jacques and I we I don't know what this show would be if we didn't have somebody to wrangle us. Basically, that's what you are, is our wrangler, Nick. With also the same amount of knowledge as both of us combined. So no, I'm Erik Valdez. I'm definitely the car guy here who likes sneakers. It's kind of the opposite to Jacques there. But yeah, we've been doing this a while. I know some of y'all listen to us on the regular. Shouts out. We were just talking about Peter Cheney before the show. Shouts out to Peter. We had him as one of our first guests. He was our first guest, right? No, second guest. Second guest. Zach was our first.
Oh yeah, after Sneaker Legal.
Yeah. But he let us know so graciously that Nick's mic was a little low in last episode. So we need that feedback. So thank you, Peter. Thank you to all of you who do chime in on the regular and let us know you're listening. We really appreciate it. But as Jacques said, we do have a new app for you today. Lots of cool new stuff happening. You figure it's the end of the year and things are starting to wind down a bit, but there's still a lot of news being released. And I don't know what that means. It's just the news cycle doesn't stop nowadays, which is it's kind of cool. Also, it just doesn't ever give us a break from anything. So I don't know if it's a good or bad thing, but either way, a lot of fun stuff coming to you today. Jacques, what do you got on the sneaker side of things? I know there's been some interesting things that popped up here.
I'm gonna keep it. Yeah, I'm gonna keep it LA because that's the energy we like around here, except for Nick. So there's been a preview of the Kobe 6 Protro in the Dodger colorway, and it looks absolutely fantastic. It's blue with white, has red number 8 on the heel. Just looks really good. I'm actually kind of excited with what Nike is doing with the Kobe line right now and really expanding the palette of Kobe and the Kobe brand. I've talked about it over on Hard Pass, but I think this is the start of the Kobe brand, as in like the Jordan brand. I don't think it's going to have a Jordan brand kind of full rollout like separate, but I think Kobe is going to occupy a space within the Nike basketball world. Now, Nick can probably tell me I'm crazy, and that's my LA talking, but I just kind of feel like that's where things are headed.
I think it would be great if they did that. I mean, I think that Kobe and I have a very love-hate relationship. It's one-sided. I never got to meet him, unfortunately, but like as a Kings fan, I can't really like him without hating him, you know? So,
True.
But I think what's beautiful about what Nike is doing with the Kobe line is that they're letting it run. Like we went through this moment of like everything selling out. We went through the drama with Vanessa and like it coming back around, and that excitement of it coming back around kind of pushed up the prices, put all the resellers on, lock, and basically said, okay, well, all the Kobe's are going to be reselling. Now I think we're getting to the point where the Dodger colorway is a great colorway. I think I forget the orange colorway that's coming out a little bit later too. Like they're starting to get into like, okay, these are shoes you can make even more of. There's a bigger audience. There's a bigger fan base for them. And that to me is like exactly what you're saying. I think they're setting it up to where, I don't think it's like Jordan level, like you said. I would think of this as like, almost like old East Bay catalogs. It's like the Team Bank colorways. It's like, let's just go. People love Kobe, but they also love Kobe's because of the performance, right? Like people still love playing in those shoes, and especially in the Protros now with a little bit of an upgrade on them. So I think they start to move into that. I think you start seeing more even of the apparel, the kind of collections will start to roll out over the next, year or two. I think it'll be really interesting. And, I hope that it continues on. I hope that it sells well, because I think that's like a pillar of Nike basketball's kind of, world that they haven't really been able to lean on that as much. And I think that ultimately hurts the rest of Nike basketball to not have that. Okay, we know we've got Kobe's line figured out. We've got the relationship with Vanessa figured out. And here, let's run now. And I think that's been missing.
Run now.
So
yeah, because they even have they even did for NFL fans out there. You may have saw that they did the Kobe Grinch cleats, which was really exciting. They've had baseball versions of some Kobe's, and now they're reaching into the NFL. And I think the natural progression is that we get a soccer boot that's inspired by a Kobe, especially considering that, the low top Kobe's were brought in because Kobe liked soccer shoes.
Yeah.
Yep. So it'd be great. Erik, is there a parallel in like the car world of like a certain brand or athlete bridging off into other aspects of the automotive world? So is there like maybe a driver that did F1, but he's loved in the Indy circuit or the other circuits?
There are a handful, especially in the F1 world, there are a handful of F1 drivers that are absolutely loved in the football, soccer space, the European version of football. Because a lot of those two sports are the biggest in the world for a reason, because, America is kind of its own unique world of stick and ball sports, so to speak, and automotive sports. But Formula One and soccer, by and large, are the most popular sports in the world. And so a lot of the drivers being European or from, Central and South America or other areas outside of the U.S. There are no, U.S. drivers at the moment in Formula One. A lot of them grew up playing soccer as well. So like you'll see clips of like Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz warming up before a race, playing, footy, just keepy uppy with the soccer ball and everything. And so you'll see jerseys exchanged with soccer players and Formula One driver helmets and stuff like that. So there's that mutual respect. But yeah, it's a little bit different than kind of what you guys are describing there. In the States, trying to think of like automotive. It kind of ties into what you're talking here, actually. Automotive sneaker sport things. You know, NFL had their My Cleats, My Cause thing campaign for the weeks 13 and 14 of this season. And one of our buddies, Eric Kendricks, who, you know, you did his sneaker tour, the closet tour on your channel a while back, which is super dope. I had dinner with him and a couple other people involved in the charity that he is representing or was representing last week. And first of all, Eric is as legit a car guy as they come. Like, he is, you know, he's a big dude, linebacker, all pro linebacker in the NFL, but somehow fits himself into, he's got an R34 Skyline. He's got a first gen Dodge Viper. He's got a notchback Mustang. He's got a Cadillac CTS 5V Blackwing or CT5V Blackwing. He's got, I mean, it's eclectic, a GT3 RS. I mean, he's as legit as it comes. And so he wore a custom pair of cleats last week's, I guess, Monday Night Football. So it would have been a week ago against the Bengals. And if you look at the design on them, it was super cool. So the company or the charity he partnered with is called Accelerate, and it's a super dope cause. Basically, they work with kids, most of them high school age, et cetera, and try to keep them off the streets, you know, both literally and figuratively in the world of motorsports and cars. They don't want them drag racing illegally. They don't want them out, you know, skipping school and stuff. And so it kind of ties both things in, and they work with like automotive education. So teaching mechanics, engineering, and what you can actually do beyond high school and college with that world of automotive. You know, kids that want to go out and become entrepreneurs and launch their own companies, et cetera. It's a really cool organization. And Erik partnered with them. They're SoCal based, which is where he's from. And they designed this sneaker that is very heavily influenced design wise by the R34 Skyline GTR in the very first Fast and the Furious. It's like this silver Adidas, you know, football cleat with like the blue hash marks along the side that if you put it side by side with that R34 Skyline, it's almost looking like the car and the sneaker, you know, right next to each other. It's super dope. And so I thought that was a cool kind of tie into all the worlds that we love, you know, with sports and you can, dope. I'm sure Nick will post some pictures of that up here, but we'll also post them out on the Instagram page and everything. But that was a nice tie-in with athletes and automotive and everything, and also doing something good for people.
Yeah, love to see that. I did one with Dak Prescott. His was about cancer. I forgot, it was terrible, but I can't think of the agency now. But he paired with an agency, and he linked with Jay Dancliff's to do the design, and he basically made it all white. But they did all the artwork in black light. So you can only see the design in black light. And the intention was about cancer screenings. A lot of people use the excuse, I didn't see any symptoms, so I didn't get a screening instead of getting their cancer screening. And so they kind of flipped it on his head. Like, you can't see the design unless you get screened. And so like you can't really find out if you have cancer unless you get screened for cancer. That's deep. And I think the stat is like 1 in 3 adults skip a cancer screening or are behind on their cancer screening, and 70% have missed their last appointment. Jeez. Which is crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. So it was dope. But no, I'm glad that like they're bringing that to attention, and they're using sneakers as an avenue to tell those stories. So shout out to the NFL for allowing that to happen. We know how strict they are.
Yes, indeed.
That is super dope. All right, before we go, because you brought up LA, I am in LA. And I need to ask a question because I don't know if this is
no less.
I do. Matt Schuhefner is going to be in our comments saying I need to get on the pod and talk you out of wearing that hat. I know, but anyway, yes. I have a question. This is a nationwide, worldwide question, but I'm in LA, and this is where I've seen it for the past 4 or 5 days. There has been probably a dozen cars with full Christmas tree light wraps or Christmas light wraps on the car with lights on, driving down the 405. And I just want to know how you guys feel about that.
Look at him trying to bash LA by making it sound like that's an LA thing. Like, they're not driving cars like that every day.
Yeah. He's like, I'm in LA and I saw this. He's like, he gave us a little bit. He was like, it's a global question nationwide. Hold on. I'm in LA.
Okay. Hold on. Let me also give credit where credit is due. You guys know I love it here anyway, but for me, it's like California up and down, basically. Yeah. But I also did see like an amazing pair of R33 Skylines out here in Costa Mesa couple nights ago, just cruising around.
Yep.
Chef's kiss to those guys. I hope those guys listen to the pod. The cars looked amazing. Yeah, but back to my question. Christmas lights on cars. Like, I think this is overkill. This is my opinion, but I think this is overkill.
First of all, I'm just upset that you're being such a Scrooge and trying to kill someone's Christmas
right?
spirit. These people are Nick? Fully engrossed in, the spirit of the holidays is upon them, and not just their homes. They want the world to know. They want the traffic on the 405 to know that it is holiday season and that you need to get into the mood. So I've never seen one that went all out. Like, I don't know how far you're talking about. Like, I've seen some that had like lights on the rear window. They've had like lights on the inside.
Oh no, I'm talking like full
lights on the dashboard.
Exterior car, probably at least 2 or 3 strings of lights. I've seen at least 4 with exterior wrap lights.
Yep.
And then there's a bunch of people, like some of the people are like what you're saying, like it's a more minimal, the grill or the light, the windows or something like that. And I'm totally okay with like the minimal approach.
It's like if you want to put antlers on your car and a little red nose on the grill, go for it. But you draw the line at Christmas lights,
Go for it.
I think the full wrap, when your car is like lighting up the side of my car going down the highway, there's like, I don't know. I feel like a hypocrite now because I'm like, I do kind of like it when you see a car that has like neon underglow every once in a while, but it's just not. Yeah, see, I don't know.
You know what you need to do?
I'm just a hater. I'm just going to check out now on this one.
You know what you need to do, Nick? And I can answer this question for you, Scrooge Ingval. You need to go talk to your nephews because think about what's going on here. You're the only one here without a kid, right? You've got your nephews, so you ought to be relating a little bit more. The things that we choose to do to bring smiles to the faces of our children sometimes involves wrapping your car with Christmas lights. Look, I'm not going to say I would do that on my own accord, but if Enzo was like, Dad, can we wrap the Rivian in Christmas lights? You best believe I'm going to tell him yes. Like, so I think on one, well, all right, on one hand, because it's LA, a lot of people just like to be seen, period. I get that. But I think the trend of decorating your car for the Christmas is not hurting anybody. So like, if that's what you want to do, roll with it, man. Plus, nowadays it's become a lot easier to do stuff like that because, back when we were growing up, it was all little mini halogen bulbs and stuff, and you had to plug into 110 and whatnot.
Oh, wow.
You got LED strings nowadays that can plug into the USB port in your car, so it's a lot easier to power these things than it used to be. So I think that has made that trend a lot more accessible to a lot more people. That's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've never seen a full wrap. But I've seen some people do a lot. Like I've seen some extreme like decorations, I'll say, on cars, where there's like welded pieces of metal on the cars or whatever it is. But I've never seen like the full on Christmas lights. Like I feel like that's pretty unique.
Well, and it's also kind of a trend, I'd say. Like a lot of people will do like, oh, I'm going to go pick up my Christmas tree in my Ferrari or Porsche. I think Larry June just did that as like one of his merch drop, teasers, right? Mm-hmm. And like that stuff happens all the time. I'm used to seeing that. One of the cars in particular was like a 2003 or 2004 Mitsubishi Eclipse, and it was so covered in lights. I mean, like had to have been 4 or 5 like big strings of lights because it was literally just wrapped around the car. And like thing. I was driving next to it like originally he pulled past me on the left and basically like I saw it and I was like, that is wild how bright that car is. And then like he slowed down, and ended up coming back up on the right side. And I'm looking at it and thinking like, how on earth does he get out of the car? Because like I can see some of the strings going over like where he wrapped the mirror down, and I'm like, so is he just like, I don't know, but like it was so extreme because it was like there was probably at least 8 strings of lights on each door or window. So like it was a lot of lights. It wasn't just like I'm going to throw this on for the night and go for a drive. It was like, I'm committed to this. The lights came in at Costco in July and I put them on that day and they're going to stay on until February kind of attitude. And more power to you, but like it's so much work In my mind, I'm just like, I'm so lazy to do that, something that extreme.
I'll send a video to the group chat, and then we may even just share it on the Instagram page. But I saw somebody the other day on Instagram. It was a clip of a guy in an RS6 Avant and like a Lamborghini. I don't remember which model, fully wrapped with lights, just trolling whatever city they're from, like, you know, just going way too fast through the city with like a Christmas tree on top of the RS6 Avant and lights all over it and stuff. So look, people are in the spirit, man. I say let them do them. You know, I'm not here to police it, I guess.
This is the first time I've seen.
I want to see it.
Yeah. We should just.
This is the first time I've seen that level of lights. I've seen wrapping paper on cars a lot. Like that's pretty popular.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot.
I've
seen that a lot.
Yeah.
Jacques, since you're in LA and Nick's in LA and I am not anymore, I was there earlier this week. I think you need to pull like an old school, instead of going and like toilet papering a house, just go throw a bunch of lights on Nick's car without him knowing in the middle of the night.
Right.
And then he wakes up to it and he has no choice but to just rock it because his nephews will be like, whoa, you did that for us, Uncle Nick. And then you're just gonna have to own it.
I feel like if I was 17, I would absolutely be doing that, because you could easily get a little battery pack, and like glue it up underneath like double-sided tape it underneath the car, and you've got enough light power to last you a few days. Like that would be like, if I was in high school, I would be pranking my friends like that.
Oh man,
this is amazing. This is amazing.
Wow.
Keeping with, let's get some more sneaker news real quick before before Nick destroys anyone else's Christmas spirit. Bima just released his collab list of the year. This was kind of in response to a lot of the things that have been happening on the complex sneakers list. And it's interesting, and you know, Nick and Erik, and I'll get you guys' perspective on this. Is a lot of the reason that I feel like Bima did this list was because the community at large felt like their voices weren't being heard when it came to the complex list, the 10 list of the year. And so Bima, which spurred Bima, which again, shout out to Bima for an incredible rollout. Execution was on point. Like you can tell he spent a little bit of money to make this all come together. And I appreciate that. Is there, like, do people respond negatively towards the lists that are put out by like Car and Driver and things like that? If they put out their top 10 lists of cars of the year, are people upset by that? Or are people just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool? Because this Bima list is really, I mean, it honestly is a result of the community being like, you guys will never include us. So does Car and Driver and all those other publications, do they still have that same sort of, do they get that sort of backlash to their content and to the list that they put out?
100%. I think.
Really? Okay.
I think it's grown into less of an informative thing and more of a engagement thing, because I feel like when people release these top 10 lists of anything, whether it be cars, since that's what we're talking about, or sneakers, or music, especially music is a huge one where people go at each other's throats over a top 10 list. I think a big part of media releasing these things is just to get people to talk about it, because they know it's going to bring controversy. I'd say 20, maybe 30% of people reading these top 10 lists when it comes to cars are like, oh, well, it's a good thing they released this because I was going to be researching this because I'm buying my new car next year. And the rest of it is just people hating on each other. Like, no, there's no way that's number one. Wouldn't even make my top 10 list. And somebody else chiming in saying, are you crazy? Like, that's the best vehicle to come out in the last decade. And so I think that's more or less what it is nowadays. Is it brings engagement, and that's, at the end of the day, that's the name of the game with everything, right? It's another form of content that gets people talking about, say, Car and Driver's top 10 list or whatever. And so, yeah, I think that just happens across the board. And I don't know, it's entertaining at the very least. And there is some information to be had about it, especially in the car space. They do go in depth on why they chose these vehicles to be on that list. And, you know, it is informative for those looking to make an educated decision on their next vehicle purchase. You've got all the stats there. If you're comparing, you know, the top 10 trucks or the top 10 sedans or whatever, you don't have to cross shop on your own. You can kind of look at this list and say, okay, opinions aside, here's the facts. The 0 to 60 times are here. The fuel economy is here. The crash test ratings are here. I can just look at all this and then click buy for all practical purposes, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I think the intention behind those lists are yes, there's a little bit of should be a trigger warning, a little bit of clickbait, a little bit of that.
Right.
But this is also like how we debate things. We would debate things on this show, right? Like we would all have a slightly different opinion on hopefully a lot of things. Yeah. And as somebody who's, like I was a part of putting together at least 2 or 3 of those lists for Complex before they did, before there was a Complex Con and it was an in-person thing, we debated and we debate hard. Like I think Jacques, you might have even been a part of 1 or 2 of those throughout the years. And, there's a lot of nuance to the way you can approach those lists. It's something that everybody's thinking about too. And it's the perfect time of year for that stuff because everybody's thinking about, okay, what was successful? Like if I'm working on the marketing side of a business, I'm thinking what worked this year? What are we going to try again next year? If I'm a content creator, a editorial, like a complex media, back when I was there, it's like, we need to like line these things up to like give us a little break to have a break at the end of the year. But like, also we want to make sure that we're still pushing things that people engage with. But I think the thing about the way Bima did this, it was so beautiful the way he rolled it all out. Like it was so well orchestrated and thought out. And I think that he is more a representation of the sneaker community as a whole than Complex. I think I said this either on the Sneaker History podcast or on our show. Like, I think what Complex missed this year is just like including enough diversity in their panel to really be representative of like, it's impossible to be an accurate representation of all the people that like sneakers, right? Like you can't have 50 million people on a panel. You can't even can't even do that in an email. Like it's impossible.
Yeah.
But for what they were doing, Complex, I think one, like, rest in peace, Clark Kent, like DJ Clark Kent was a huge part of these debates year in, year out, like even when I was there, like I was never a part of the debates. I was always kind of like orchestrating behind the scenes. So like, him and the Ronnie Feig and Russ Bankston and Joe LaPuma and those guys back in the day, they all had differing opinions, but Clark was the voice that carried the Complex, kind of, it's almost like the braggadociousness of New York, right? Like he was the Brooklyn in all of that stuff. And I think if you are in the sneaker scene at all, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And for him to not be there, like they were fighting a huge uphill battle. I'm sure just getting it out, but I'm sure like emotionally those guys are close, like they're, like when I was working at Complex, we were all hanging out. We were friends, like I'm still friends with those guys, but like we were seeing each other regularly. And like if we were all in the same place at all times, and one of us was not around, like it puts a damper on things. But not to give that as an excuse, but it kind of showed in the output of what they do and what they did with the list this year. And I think the interesting thing about the Bima approach to this is like it kind of I don't know if he was planning to go that hard on his list before all of the debate happened, because I don't know if we shared with the audience, but like essentially when Complex had their Complex Con, they do this panel, Sneaker of the Year. They debate the top 10 sneakers of the year. It's basically the Complex Sneakers team, which is Joe LaPuma, Brendan Dunn, Matt Welty, I think Lil Yachty, and forget who else was on there.
I forgot who else was on there. Yeah.
But essentially, Bima is coming at it from a marketing perspective and a storytelling perspective, the way that we would come at these conversations. And I think that's what I love to see his approach to his list. But when he does that, he's criticizing in a like a way that's supposed to be supportive of people, right? Like sometimes, yes, people come off snarky, even, the three of us will do that sometimes and come off snarky towards things when it's like something we're passionate about. But with Bima, he basically was in the audience for the panel, and there was like some back and forth between him and Lil Yachty, and Lil Yachty kind of was a little out of line in my opinion, in like the way that he approached talking to Bima. And, Complex is not going to like throw an extra chair on the stage and have Bima come up and have the conversation. That's just not how those shows work. There's mics, there's cameras, there's all these things going on. In a perfect world, it'd be cool to see somebody be able to come up on stage and be a part of that conversation. But I think what happened was you saw the pushback from the community. Lil Yachty came out and hopped on IG Live with Bima and basically apologized, and like they, kind of straightened things out between the two of them. But like what Bima did was bring more people, more diversity, and like actually have like more representation within the community to like have this conversation. And I think that's the part that like, as a, at Complex, I was always trying to do that. I try to do that as much as I can with my platforms, but it really is something that I think this is much bigger than sneakers. I think this needs to be something that happens all across the board. To your questions about the motor trend lists and those big, outlets, Erik brought a great point, we'll probably get into it, but Hearst just acquired Motor Trend. So like now the biggest magazines in the car world are all owned by the same company. So if that is all controlled by one narrative, then we don't get to actually hear perspectives, or even beyond that, we're potentially, putting ourselves in a situation where an entire list can be bought by, whoever wants to throw money towards that publication.
It's an interesting take, because there's been and I won't name names directly because I don't want to call anybody out. I'm not educated enough to know definitively if there's truth behind this or not. But in general, a lot of these journalism publications, journalists, etc., are now entertainers, and therefore like it started a few years ago when you would see, call it Motor Trend, Car and Driver, etc., doing a post for Toyota or Ford or whatever it was, and it would be a sponsored post on Instagram. And you're like, that goes against every bit of journalism 101 there is. The point of journalism is supposed to be this, this voice between the outside world and the consumer, and how to best educate them on stuff in an unbiased fashion. But to have publications like that are journalists, for all practical purposes, comprised of journalists giving their opinions and their insight on things, starting to collaborate with brands and have paid for sponsored posts, it kind of threw the journalist thing out the window. And I think now we've kind of all quietly, adapted to this world of those publications being less of a journalism approach, more of an informational and, educational / entertaining platform. And I think that's just something that, whether people realize that or not, because it kind of was a slow transition. I think that's where we are nowadays. You've got the, quote unquote Consumer Reports, et cetera, that are supposed to be unbiased. I think a lot of those reports that come out are also, there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes that you can't tell me that their lists are definitively, neutral. And so I don't know. It's the world we live in nowadays. Even something, as big as X being bought by Elon Musk for in the sake of freedom of speech, et cetera, stuff is being suppressed if it doesn't, if it's not meeting certain people's criteria. And so you can't tell me that journalism as it once was is completely, neutral and open and whatnot. Everything is just entertainment nowadays with some elements of education to it.
Well, and I think so to give a little more context to that, when I was at Complex, this is, I don't know, 8-10 years ago now, at least, but we had a whole team of editorial, and we had a whole team of basically advertising and sales for the other side of the business. We did have a very clear and separate line between those two teams. Obviously, when you work with a company, you get to know people from both sides, but they created content that was, sponsored or, powered by, or however you want to word it. But I even ran into issues where they would run a like top 10 sneakers of all time and be like, okay, this isn't how we would present this as an editorial team. Sure. So like there's always a back and forth there. There's always a kind of it was completely separate. But when things went out where it was like, oh, like we can't say that, then there would be a back and forth between those two teams to make it work as much as possible. I say that to say, I think that the bigger issue is that journalism and media as a whole has been so suppressed and so underfunded. You know, like all these companies get acquired. You know, BuzzFeed is you know, like bot complex. Verizon was a part of it. Hearst was a part of it. Like there's been so many people that have come and tried to take pieces and earn and make a bunch of money off of it and move on from the complexes of the world. You know, we see it all across the board in media. It's really tough time to do any of that stuff and make money. And it's also partly because Google runs the ad network of most of the world. Facebook runs their ad network. You know, like everything is saying you got to play in our space in order to make money on our space. And we see it even in content, you know, with YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat, whatever. And it's really difficult, but I do think that like my hope in this whole conversation is that we've kind of hit the pendulum to the farthest it can swing one way. And I think that we're going to get back to, hopefully, to a place where journalism matters more. You know, like we kind of need that balance in the world. And I say that to like point out one thing we didn't talk about pre-show, but you know, Sean Evans and Chris Schoenberger just bought Hot Ones from BuzzFeed, like host, creator, and I forget the woman's name who was behind the scenes of that too. But you know, them with a few investors bought Hot Ones for $80-something million. Huge kudos to them. You know, that is something that I think, without being a creator and without being, you know, like there's so many things that I was a part of creating that Jacques and I have pitched as ideas to people throughout the years that we would have had to have walked away from or lost all of that and never seen a penny from it because we just love doing it. To see somebody who really loves doing it, Chris Schoenberger and you know, Sean Evans, be able to acquire that entity. I am 1,000% a supporter of where they're headed, whatever it means. Yeah. I say that to also say, if you like what somebody does on the internet, support them in any way you can, because whether it's a newsletter, a blog, a channel, a Instagram account, people really need to know that you like what they do, because it's really difficult for people to monetize what they're doing, especially in the early days of doing it. And it's so rare that we get to see people see that kind of success. And I think that should be an inspiration to anybody that wants to have a conversation, that wants to start a YouTube channel to create some content and tell their stories. Like that is like the pinnacle of like, we made this amazingly successful. Billions of people have watched our stuff, and we got to buy it back because the big businesses couldn't figure out how to make the money work. And now they're going to do it. And it's going to be something that's going to be really powerful for the next, you know, foreseeable future in the content space, in my opinion.
It's kind of like the modern day equivalent of an artist, a musical artist owning their masters, you know, and not being going completely independent and not being part of a label. And I feel like it's interesting. We saw, you know, the rise of and the importance of the label in the music industry, and then kind of the downfall of that. It still exists and it still has a purpose to a certain extent, especially for developing artists. But with the advent of social media and the internet and everything, that whole world changed. It's happening in my industry and, you know, television and film at a rapid pace right now, where we're starting to see, you know, people, this whole new world of independent television is starting to become a thing where, you know, the indie film world has always been a thing, but independent films were always thought of as like the artistic expression, the kind of festival darlings, et cetera, that didn't quite meet commercial criteria and therefore weren't released, you know, with the blessing of a studio, et cetera. But all that's changing. People are now in both film and television creating amazing stuff independently. And instead of waiting for the support or the budget from a big studio, et cetera, to give them that stuff to then go create, they're creating it and then selling it in, you know, themselves or partnering with a studio for the marketing purposes, et cetera, and moving forward that way. So there's a massive shift in all of content creation at, that whole space. And even going back to the, like I said, with Motor Trend being acquired by Hearst and everything, I don't know what the idea behind all that is. You could theoretically go independent as a magazine, or whatever you want to call that nowadays, because it's much more than just a piece of paper, bound together. They have their social media presence. They have all this other stuff. Theoretically, you could go independent with that too, but for whatever reason, someone thinks that I guess they've been acquired by a few people. They were owned previously by Warner Brothers Discovery, and that's who Hearst purchased them from. So I don't know. There's just this massive shift happening in all forms of content right now, and I don't know what's going to really win out, but it seems like, to your point, Nick, if people have a passion, there's several avenues to get stuff out there. It doesn't mean you're going to be an overnight success. It is very hard. We all know that in our own respective,
very hard.
Through our own respective journeys in our industries. But, if you do like something out there, don't just say, oh, that was fun, and then scroll past it. Throw a like on it. Subscribe to whatever it is. Like, let the people know. It's funny. Everybody's always asking, I don't mean to go on a rant here, but like, how can I support what you're doing? You don't have to do a whole lot, really. Just, like, subscribe, as cliche as that sounds, share it if you like it, things like that. And there's no monetary, you don't have to invest anything in the people that you like. If you want to throw the Cars and Kicks crew a little tip here and there so we can buy, some Christmas lights for our cars or something, you could do that. But no, just sharing it is all that a lot of creators need, because once that momentum kicks in, then suddenly people grow, and then they're able to monetize things, et cetera, and create livelihoods for themselves outside of just creating for passion. You know what I mean? So that's a whole other, we could do episodes on that topic right there.
Yeah,
for sure.
A full episode.
Yep.
We went a little rant there, but we'll get back to the Cars and Kicks news. Actually, some Cars news that I saw that I wanted to talk about was there's a Porsche 911.
Porsche.
That was from Porsche. That's what I said. Porsche. I said Porsche.
Way to go, Nick.
Must have cut off. My mic must have cut off. That was so weird. From 1975. It's a 911 Turbo, and it's going to auction. I think it's going to sell for $300,000 smackaroos. Now, I don't know a lot about this stuff, but I know they specifically mentioned that it's a right-hand drive. So could you guys go into that and break that down, and why this one in particular is so special that they're like, oh my, everybody's like fawning over it?
So for a couple of reasons, this happens with a lot of different car manufacturers, but especially in the Porsche world, where production number, color of exterior, color of interior, options list, et cetera, all that really plays into the exclusivity of a car, and subsequently what it's going to be, what the market is going to say it's worth. And in this case, 75 930 Turbo is one of the first, I think I saw this article too, and it's like one of the first 400 911 Turbos ever created. And according to some of the numbers that I've seen, right-hand drive cars are always, the number of production is always less than left-hand drive cars, because especially nowadays, there are more countries that do use left-hand drive vehicles versus right-hand drive. And for those that may not be the car people in the world that listen to this for the sneaker stuff, it literally means you're driving, if you're used to driving in the United States of America, your steering wheel's on the left. In some places in Europe and Asia and Australia, et cetera, it is on the right side of the car. So not to get too basic on you, but that's what right-hand drive stands for. And I think in the early 911s, there was something like less than 5% of them were produced in right-hand drive. The color combo on this particular car with the plaid interior and everything like that, all that really factors into what makes it worth whatever it ends up selling for. The interesting thing is, how will that tie into the collectability aspect of it? Because it being right-hand drive, I don't know if either of you have ever driven a right-hand drive car in this country. I have. This country's not designed for that. You can't go through drive-thrus. Yeah. If you go through parking garages, you can't pull the ticket. You can't, it's not really designed for that. So if this happens to go to a collector in this country, for example, it's probably never going to be driven. It might not be driven regardless of where it goes, but it can really only be used in an easy way in countries that support right-hand drive vehicles, because it's a novelty. It's cool. Like if you're going to take it to Cars and Coffee and stuff, but it is a pain. Like like I said, if you have to go in a parking garage or anything like that, you're on the wrong side of the car. I've got a buddy of mine who's got he's a big TVR guy. Matter of fact, he let me use one of his up in Vancouver a while back, and there's videos of him out there, and he drives them in LA. And I'm not going to call him out by name because I don't know that technically he's supposed to be driving these cars in the United States of America. So I'm just going to leave it at that. If you're listening, you know who
That's
you are.
funny.
But like he'll put videos of him going into parking garages, and he's got, those little trash picker uppers that people use, the little like claw thing. He's got that. So he'll be on the right side of the car and he'll like reach that across and like pull his parking ticket or whatever.
Funny.
So yeah, all that to say that's what's factoring into the kind of projected price point of this particular car. But again, unfortunately, it's probably going to end up in a collection and not get driven anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing that blows. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, I mean, I've been into Japanese cars since I was 12, 13 years old, and I've seen less than a handful of right-hand drive Porsches. I mean, even in Japan, we saw multiple left-hand drive Porsches on our trip.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't see any right-hand drive Porsches. So I think that there's a rarity to this, but to Eric's point, like it's not like a convenient car for anybody here in the States, but if you're a collector, then, this is a fun one to show up at a random Cars and Coffee. You're going to get a lot of attention from it. So,
yeah.
Wow. It's just fantastic to me that these cars just pop up out of nowhere. Like it feels like this is such a part of the culture of like car culture that it'll be like, oh, this random TVR 7800 from 1962 has been in a garage for the last 40 years and just popped up out of nowhere, and it's in mint condition. You're like, wait, what? How? Why? What are these people? How? What's going on? It feels like it's such a part of car culture. It's so weird to me.
I mean, I've seen similarities on the sneaker side though, like where people will pop out at an event with a pair of Carhartt 4s or something, and that's just that you never see out in public. And maybe it's
so.
It's just their way of showing. I mean, we saw some pretty rare stuff on feet at the Cars and Kicks event at the Motoring Club when we went to that a month or two ago, whenever that was. So I feel like given the proper opportunity, the sneakerheads pop out with stuff that's been hidden away for years as well. It's different in the car world because and again, maybe there's a space for this, but there's no like big auction sites for super rare sneakers right now. You've got sites to purchase, sneakers, the StockX's of the world, et cetera, but there's no bring a trailer equivalent for the sneaker space. Right. And maybe we're onto something there. Maybe we need to launch that. I don't know. Seems like I have an idea every episode, whether it's good or not. I don't know, but
we keep that energy going.
Yeah.
I think it's different for me with cars, I think, because like a sneaker from, was it 1975, right?
Yeah.
From 1975.
It's not wearable.
It's not wearable at all. Like it's trash at this point. But this stuff is like, oh yeah, it's in mint condition.
Yeah.
It looks beautiful. Look at that. I mean, that plaid interior on that thing.
It's so sick.
I was like, oh, that is so sick. That's crazy. So it's just so weird to me. Like you have these cars from 50, 60 years ago that are in like perfect mint condition, and they're like they've just been sitting in somebody's garage somewhere and just never brought out. I don't know. It's strange.
I think the other differentiating factor between the sneaker side and the car stuff like that is that it's kind of like one of the first episodes we recorded about the Miles Nadal's collection, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of times when people collect sneakers, even though when they do collect rare stuff like he had, or like Jacques and I have decently rare stuff in our collections, if we're going to sell those shoes, we'd probably sell them as a collection of sneakers versus just a one-off thing. And it's really rare to, like I will wear a rare pair once in a while, but to me, like to be able to have that shoe and be able to continue to tell that story or tell that story to the next generation or people that just didn't hear it, whenever I, was enthralled by it and purchased that pair, that to me is a missing piece in sneakers as a whole. I think we're seeing a little bit of that bubble up with like, the Wu-Tang Dunks coming back out where you had this like polarizing response to it. It's like, for me, that's a really dope shoe. It was limited to 36 pairs for, 36 chambers originally. And like, I've seen a few of them on foot in my lifetime, but it's extremely rare nowadays to see them. That's one of the rare pairs, the Dunks and, Jordan 1s that will last the test of time, and be able to be worn. But like with them re-releasing those, it takes away from that, and I understand both sides of that argument. But like, if now, 10,000 or 50,000 or however many thousands of people have those pairs, it doesn't have the same level of, wow factor when you see it out in public. And now it's going to be told in a different story. It's just going to be like, hey, I hit on Sneakers app. But before, everybody that saw that was going to, like, if you wore that down Sunset Strip, you would have people coming across the street to be like, how did you get that pair of shoes? Because it was so rare to be able to get them.
Let me ask you this though. I'm going to throw a like Jacques-esque question in the sneaker space, because I know everything about sneakers, just like Jacques knows everything about cars. I know, but I'm asking this question on behalf of, the masses that might not know, you know what I'm saying? So does it dilute that original sneaker or not? Because, for example, yes, there are a whole bunch more of them out there, but there's still only 36 original versions of that. It's a lot like, to me, the original Shelby Cobra. There are very few of those you ever see driving on the street. There's a guy in Burbank that has like 3 or 4 of them. And if you go to Bob's Big Boy on a Friday night, at any given time, he's got one of them out there. And there's one in particular that is like the original gold paint, but it's all beat up because it was raced and everything. And if you're not a car person, it looks like just a beat up old convertible car. That car is probably worth $2.5 million because it's in its original form. However, you may see 2 or 3 other Cobras there the same night that are kit cars. So it's a little bit different here because it's not even re-released. There were some re-releases by Shelby American, the CSXs, et cetera, that came out. But to me, car person, if I see one of the originals, it doesn't mean any less to me just because there's a whole bunch of replicas or reproductions floating around out there. So how, is that similar in the sneaker space, or is it a little different?
That's a great question. I think it depends on who you are, but also I think the unique thing about the car space is even if it's like a reissue, it's not going to be a 1-to-1 replica of the original. Whereas I feel like in sneakers, you can do a pretty close 1-to-1, like nobody can really tell the difference. Whereas with a car, I feel like people will be able to tell the difference between an OG original and a reissue of it. Like, am I wrong about that, Nick?
No, I think that you could, you'd have to be up close to a shoe to really be able to tell, right? Like with like the Wu-Tang Dunks, for instance, as an example, there's definitely a difference in quality of material from the originals and the retro version. I don't think it necessarily takes, like, if you cared about that shoe to begin with, I don't think it takes away from the cool factor of a shoe. I do think that the collectible nature of shoes and like this Porsche, right-hand drive Porsche that we're talking about, there's less interest in those original, like if I'm a billionaire collector of things, I don't necessarily like, if I like Wu-Tang and I want a Wu-Tang Dunk, I'm going after a Wu-Tang Dunk. But if there's retro product of something that's out there, I'm probably more likely going to look at other things that are out there that are more unique, a little bit more rare, or a story that maybe hasn't been retold, because it's kind of reminds me of the Miles Nadal stuff again. the moon shoes that he had, right? Those are from the 70s. You know, they survived. You're not going to wear them, but at some point, you know, those shoes were worth, I don't know, hundreds of thousands, $1 million+ dollars, you know, at the peak of, you know, kind of sneaker buying in 2020, 2021. But like now, you know, like the number of people, I think that the value inherently drops because the number of people that care enough to say that's a retro and that's an original and I want the original goes down. Like it's accessible. People that are just out there to get something because it's rare, you know, or because they, you know, like if you see it on the street all the time, if you see it in the mall all the time on people's feet, people aren't going to necessarily want to show up with that. Right. Like for me, like, I think if I think of like going to like an event, right, for cars or for sneakers rather, I almost always wore Chucks to everything. It's my favorite shoe. It's super low key. I don't need the attention. Like I really don't collect shoes to go get attention at a sneaker con necessarily. Occasionally I'll wear something rare. Like when I went up to Portland on the trip that I talked about on the show a while back, you know, I brought some stuff that I hadn't pulled out in a long time because I knew that people there would be like, oh, that's that, you know? But I think we're that like, the passion from that has to be removed from the dollar value, in my opinion. And I think that's where, you know, if a car is rare and you care about the rarity, like Eric's example, I've seen some of those Cobras. I don't know if I've seen that one, but I've been to that Bob's Big Boy. It's such a cool part of like Southern California car culture that happens. And to know that, you know, like there's a ton of people, most of society would look at a Cobra and not know the difference between an original and a remake just because they wouldn't care to go down that path. Yeah. But it's the same thing on the sneaker side. Like if you saw somebody with the originals and like, especially over time, as it moves past, the original Wu-Tangs will go up in value as more and more people wear the retros, as we move past the, you know, like the commodity of being able to get a pair right now. Yeah. I think as time, it still will increase in value because like the story needs to be retold every 10, 15, 20 years, whatever that cadence is that people are, you know, wanting to tell the stories. But I think that is a really interesting example of, you know, like the collectible nature of things. And, you know, it really just depends on what you're about and how you're into it. Right. Like Erik, you said something about it, that Porsche that just resonates with me. Like, I don't want to own a bunch of cars that are never driven. Like I already own a bunch of sneakers that I don't wear. I love having them. I give away tons of pairs, but like the stuff that I've worn,
I hadn't gotten any yet. Just saying.
I have to send you a few extra pairs of socks, you know? But like, you know, like with cars, it's a little bit different because anybody can drive a car. With sneakers, it's like, okay, well, it's a size 13, right? Like, but also how many people really want to wear a pair of shoes that I've already worn? Not a lot of people, you know, like, so there's a difference in that, right? Like you might want something that's cared for. You might want a car that's been garaged for a long time to get it. But if you're not going to drive it, then ultimately like the world doesn't get to see it and experience it. So it's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
True. Well, I think there's a couple things I wanted to touch on before we get to the close of this episode. Last week's episode, we teased the Ford Mustang GTD and their attempt at a Nurburgring record. The numbers are out. It's not as quick as I was kind of not hoping for necessarily, but you know, me thinking their benchmark would have been the GT3 RS might have been a bit ambitious. It's not as quick as that. I will say that. However, they do now hold the record for the quickest American production car around the ring with a time of 6 minutes, 57.685 seconds, which again, to the sneakerheads that are listening to this that are new to the car world, doesn't mean much to you, but that's the equivalent of breaking the 2 hour barrier on a marathon or something. It is no small feat to run, you know, a 12+ mile crazy narrow, crazy treacherous track like the Nurburgring in under 7 minutes. And Ford put up some video of this and just the onboard footage, the telemetry, everything. it's really, I can sit there and just watch it over and over again because it's so cool to just listen to it and watch, where the driver's braking, where they're accelerating, the turn-in points, this and that, all the fine details that go into running a sub 7-minute time at the Nurburgring. So shouts out to Ford. Kudos to them for doing that. I feel like it's only going to last for a short amount of time until like Corvette ZR1 goes out there on proper tires and proper conditions. But that's kind of the fun of this, is we see this kind of back and forth, of nobody really holds the record at the ring for a long period of time. That's kind of like what motivates everybody else to do even better, which I love that aspect of it. It's not something that, a record that stands for years and years on end by design. It's kind of meant for people to continue to push the envelope. And so I think that's, aside from just creating a cool car that goes quick, it's good for competition because it makes somebody else out there be like, oh, okay, so Ford did that. Okay, then this is our benchmark now, right? So it's pretty awesome, man. Shouts out to them for that accomplishment.
I wonder how many companies go out there and be like, well, not this year. We ain't got it.
It happens.
Delete that press release. Delete that press release right now.
Yeah, this is where it's all orchestrated heavily behind the scenes, right? Like Ford wouldn't have teased this a week ago if the data and everything else didn't already tell them that they had a really solid shot of doing it. Because can you imagine having to backtrack on something like that if it just flopped? But it's cool nonetheless, just to kind of have that build up and then be able to see it all come to fruition. So that was a cool moment.
The competition, though, like I really love that about cars and motorsports in general, right? Like to be able to, if on like the biggest scale, if you haven't watched Ford versus Ferrari, like that's a good example of like how much these companies push each other on the racetrack and what it means for us as consumers to the cars we eventually get that trickle down, technology or whatever. I wish we still had more of that in the sneaker space. I was actually just talking about this earlier today in the Discord. Like back in the 80s and early 90s, Asics and Reebok and Nike and everybody just had advertisements that were like, kind of like, going after the competition, like there's there's some Asics ads that are, like basically saying like, well, your Air can't do this kind of thing at Nike. And ultimately I think that all, it's like the Reebok pump up and air out campaigns. And I think that competition is just so good for everyone, like people push themselves to do better on the design, on the technology, on the, like, it's kind of like when a car comes out or a sneaker comes out and it's like, wow, the price point is what? I can get this other pair that's equally as good for, 20% less or, whatever it is. I'd love to see more of that. Like, I think like we're in this weird era where like everyone is offended by everything that's, maybe directed or subtweet kind of things. But this from Ford is a great way for them to be like, not only are we going to, build this crazy car, we're going to come out here and, rub it in your face that it's fast and like, it's something to be reckoned with. And now hopefully, like, I hope we see 5 other companies in the next, 6 months going out there and be like, we can get this, because that ultimately helps all of us as consumers to, and just as, watchers of all of these fun things too. So,
yeah. There was a few years ago, there was a little kind of went, I guess, viral, for lack of a better term. I don't even remember where it was, but there was a couple local dealers in, I think it's the Midwest somewhere, a Ford and a Chevy dealer. And they were going back and forth on these billboard wars for a little while where, like, I think one of the Ford dealerships posted something like, behind every Ford is a Chevy or something. And then the Chevy guys on the other side of the freeway posted, well, because you won't move out of the fast lane. And it was like, they're promoting their individual products, but in a very like lighthearted, humorous way. And it'd be fun to see more of that. It's I don't know. It's everybody takes themselves too seriously nowadays. And it would just be nice to have some of that like fun banter back and forth,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I know we're running a bit long, which we tend to do. Kind of going out on the Ford tip. I just want to touch on two other things. One that just came out yesterday or today, I can't even remember. But we'll talk more about this on the next episode, I'm sure, because more info will come out. But there is a new Ford Escort that is going to be released, and we're not talking about the Escort that we drove here in the States. We're talking about the Mark I Escort that was originally released, I think, late '60s, early '70s is when it was produced in Europe. And the interesting thing about this car is it's kind of instead of calling it a resto mod, they're calling it like a continue mod or something. And, we've harped on Singer for taking Porsche and talked about their troubles with lawsuits for, reimagining Porsches. And we talked recently about vintage Broncos and their troubles with Ford, et cetera. Well, this company, it's called Borham, I believe, if I'm pronouncing that right, out of the UK. They have launched this kind of retro modern take on this car with the blessing of Ford. They actually licensed this. So, and the approach to this is instead of taking donor cars like Singer did with Porsches, et cetera, they basically license the rights to all the tooling and everything. So they're doing like a blueprinted 1-for-1 version of an old Mark I Ford Escort, but modernizing it and making it, the renderings and everything and the video they released look amazing. Again, we'll get more information on this soon, but the kind of quick and dirty is they're only going to make, I think, 150 of them. They're going to start at like $375,000. So unfortunately, I don't think any of us are going to be getting one for the podcast purposes just yet. But yeah, the stats look pretty awesome. Again, it's kind of Nick's favorite thing of extreme lightweight with, decent horsepower. So we'll talk probably on the next episode a bit more about that, but that was super cool.
Definitely want to dig into that.
Yeah. And then lastly, I just kind of want to give a shout out to my buddy, Matt D'Andrea. I had a trip out to LA this last week to kind of finally formally say goodbye to all my castmates and some of our crew and writers, et cetera. For those that don't know, the show that I've been on for the past 4 years, Superman and Lois, shout out to the stunt department for this hat. We had our series finale air a couple weeks ago. It was 4 incredible years of my life working with some extremely talented people. And we had our kind of final hurrah wrap party screening of the final 2 episodes in LA this last week. So that was an amazing moment. But the car aspect of that is I just literally threw out a post on my Instagram like, hey, I'm going to be in LA for a couple of days. Who's got something cool for me to drive? And my buddy Matt D'Andrea, who's been in the car space, podcast space for years. He's hosted a handful of automotive podcasts, et cetera. He had just sitting in his garage, he had a SEMA build from a couple years ago. A Mustang Mach 1 that is just ridiculous. I mean, he worked with Anderson's Composites to do all sorts of carbon fiber hood and, diffusers and rear wing and front splitter, et cetera. HRE wheels, did a dope set of wheels. I mean, it's got 305s on the front and 315s in the rear, just like, I know, Jacques, you know exactly what that means. Just like it's
my eyes haven't glossed over at all. No.
For the sneakerheads, that's like putting Shaq's size 23 or whatever it is on all 4 corners of the car. It's just a lot of tire, which helps with grip and performance, etc. Helion did a twin turbo kit on it. It's like something like 630 horsepower to the rear wheels. It was obnoxiously awesome. Made all the right noises. If I'm gonna go to LA for a couple days and my homies are gonna throw me cars like that, I might have to make a few more trips out there because it was a fun couple days. So again, shouts out to Matt and Ford and Anderson Composites and HRE Wheels and everybody involved in that SEMA build because it was just an incredible vehicle to get to drive for a couple days. So thank you guys for that.
Love that. Well, next time you're gone, I've got a 2007 Infiniti M35 that you can pal around in while you're in LA.
I didn't see you chime in on my Instagram with that request. That would have been a hard choice between those two, Jacques.
I know. I'm just putting it out there just in case.
I mean, that could be the perfect Cars and Kicks drift car.
It could.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. You wanted to modify it, Jacques. I know you wanted to, restore it for your daughter or whatever, but
restore it. Yeah.
We could just restore it for us.
It's crazy that he had that just sitting in his garage. Yeah, I'm gonna just start going around in LA and opening people's garages and be like, "What you got in here?
Yep.
Why aren't you driving this? Why aren't you driving this? What's going on?"
That'll be Jacques'
Oh.
garage tours. He's gonna, go from the sneaker closet tours to the garage tours. That's his new
just
thing.
Randomly going to people's garages, be like, "Open up your garage. I need to see what's in there." We're doing. It's official. I've got a Cars and Kits badge. Anyway, as we had a ton of news this episode that we didn't get a chance to get into. I definitely want to talk about the Escort thing because I saw it and I didn't think it was real, but I'm glad to know that it was real because it looked like it was all like digitally made. A couple of the shots, and at first they got me, and I was like, yes, but then I was like, wait a minute. My finely tuned eye realized that it wasn't actually, it was all digital rendering, and then my heart was broken. But we'll get into that on the next episode. But definitely want to thank you guys for listening to Cars and Kicks. I am Jacques Slade, aka Cousteau. You can find me all over the internets. But again, this show doesn't work without these two wonderful gentlemen or scholars, just cut from a different cloth kind of guys, as opposed to the raccoon of the group that I am. So with that being said, I'll pass this off to Nick and let him close out the show.
Oh man, a raccoon.
Jacques-isms, yeah.
My name is Nick Engvall. You can find me at Nick Engvall on all platforms. Also have a sneaker history podcast. You can listen to me go a little bit deeper into sneakers every week over there. But this is just a fun conversation, and I try to keep the raccoons from getting out of hand. Basically, I think is my job here.
That's what we do. We just we provide endless entertainment at the expense of whatever. I'm Erik Valdez. You can find me again. It's just my name, ErikValdez on the socials. And we appreciate you guys listening again. For all those that have been here since day one, our OGs, to those of you that have just jumped on, we appreciate it. And we got a lot more coming for you. So thanks again. We'll see y'all on the next one.
Peace.